Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The Southeast Asian nations of Cambodia and Thailand, who share a 800-kilometer-long frontier, are engaged in their worst fighting in over a decade. More than 30 people have been killed and nearly 200,000 people have been displaced in the fighting between the two countries that erupted on the 24th of July. The two nations have resorted to the use of heavy weaponry, and the clashes have now spread to at least 12 different locations along the border. Thailand has accused Cambodia of firing into civilian areas and has evacuated all villages deemed to be within the radius of its rockets. Cambodia, for its part, has accused Thailand of using cluster munitions that are banned in much of the world because of their indiscriminate effect on civilian populations. Global leaders have appealed for an immediate ceasefire, but to no avail. Our next report gets you more.
A long-running border dispute between Cambodia and Thailand, both popular destinations for tourists, erupted into intense fighting with jets, artillery, tanks and ground troops on Thursday. Both countries accused each other of firing the first shots. Bangkok claimed that the clashes began with Cambodia's military deploying drones to conduct surveillance of Thai troops near the border. Phnom Penh pointed the accusatory finger towards Thai soldiers for triggering the conflict by violating a prior agreement by advancing on a Khmer Hindu temple near the border. The dispute between the countries dates back to more than 100 years. When the borders of the two nations were drawn following the French occupation of Cambodia. Sporadic clashes have been reported over the years which resulted in soldiers and civilians killed on both sides. In May, a Cambodian soldier was killed in a clash, ramping up tensions and plunging bilateral ties to their lowest point in more than a decade. According to the Health Ministry of Thailand on Friday, more than 130,000 people evacuated from Thailand's border regions. Residents in Thailand's Surin province, bordering Cambodia, who were forced to seek shelter in universities and schools, narrated their ordeal and expressed their helplessness in helping out the elderly and the disabled.
We were shocked too. Nobody wants this to happen. I feel for the elderly and the disabled. It's very difficult for them to get here. It's a real struggle. Some people have cars, which is good, but for those who don't, it's really hard. We feel for them. We sympathize, but we don't know how to help. We also have elderly people with us, so we try to help as much as we can.
On Friday evening, a Thailand military border commander, citing Cambodia's use of force to enter Thai territory, declared martial law in 8 districts on the frontier with Cambodia. China, which has political and strategic ties with both the countries, expressed deep concern over the conflict and urged both sides to resolve issues through dialogue and consultation. The United States, Australia, the European Union and France have all called for peace. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who chairs the Association of Southeast Asian Nations or ASEAN, offered to facilitate talks between the two countries on Thursday. On Friday, the Thailand Foreign Ministry spokesperson said that Thailand is open to the idea of Malaysia mediating in efforts to find a negotiated solution to its bloody conflict with Cambodia.
We are ready to, if Cambodia would like to settle this matter or have a dialogue through diplomatic channel, bilaterally or even through Malaysia, we are ready to do that. But so far, we haven't had any response on that.
Bilaterally or even through.
In the long-running dispute between the countries, dozens of kilometers in several areas are contested. Between 2008 and 2011, fighting broke out, leaving at least 28 people killed and tens of thousands displaced. In 2013, a United Nations court ruling settled the matter for over a decade. but the eruption of the current crisis has brought life along the border region to an abrupt halt.
The Israeli-imposed starvation of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip has resulted in the deaths of more than 120 Palestinians, of which more than 80 are said to be children. At this moment, there are an estimated 6,000 trucks that are loaded with food, medicines and other humanitarian supplies that are waiting on the other side of the borders in Jordan and Egypt. But Israel, as a matter of policy, as a part of this war on the Gaza Strip, isn't letting any food or medicines for the starving Palestinians into Gaza. So as children's limbs waste away due to starvation and the helpless Palestinian parents watch their children grow weaker each day and die, this is clearly a failure of the international community. Now, Israel insists that it is only going after Hamas, but the collective starvation of all Palestinians in the Gaza Strip means that the price that is being paid for in this war is by the innocent Palestinian civilians who are trapped and have no way out. The United States and Israel have now pulled out of the negotiations from Doha for any kind of a ceasefire deal. And what this means is that the bloodletting in Gaza Strip isn't going to end anytime soon. Our next report gets you more. Day after day, week after week, the Palestinian parents in the Gaza Strip are watching their children grow weaker and weaker, emaciated, hungry, and too weak to even cry out for food. The muscles on their tiny limbs are clearly wasting away. Prolonged starvation even affects the brain. Changes that are irreversible even if children manage to survive and abundant food is made available to them at a later date. This is the Israeli-imposed starvation of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Where more than 2 million people for months have been completely denied access to food and other basic amenities. And now, it is not just the Israeli bombs, missiles and gunfire that is killing the Palestinians. Hunger is the biggest calamity that has been brought down on the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
What is his fault? Did this boy carry a rocket and go to fight the Jews, Israelis? I don't care if the war continues, but let the borders open. Let the aid in for children. If we leave this boy, maybe soon he will slip through our fingers. Maybe he will die and we didn't manage to do anything for him.
At the charity soup kitchens, Palestinians are lining up with a desperation that no words can describe. Young children, women and the elderly, each one of them starving, desperate to get a bowl of gruel. The struggle for food is unimaginable. The trickle of supplies that are being allowed to get into the Gaza Strip are all now sourced through the GHF, the Israeli-American-backed agency that has been criticized for the manner it has gone about the food distribution process. The survival of the fittest has acquired a whole new meaning in this desperate scramble for food in the Gaza Strip. As Palestinian men, driven by hunger, gather at the food distribution sites run by the GHF to get a sack of flour to feed their hungry families. Almost 1,000 Palestinians have been killed at these food distribution sites of the Israeli-American Gaza Humanitarian Foundation because the Israelis have repeatedly opened fire. There is widespread condemnation for the starvation that is being imposed on the Palestinians of Gaza. But as Antonio Guterres put it, words don't feed hungry children.
Our own heroic staff continue to serve in unimaginable conditions. Many are so numb and depleted that they say they feel neither dead nor alive. Children, speaking of wanting to go to heaven, because at least they say there is food there. We hold video calls with our own humanitarians who are starving before our eyes. And this is not just a humanitarian crisis, it's a moral crisis that challenges the global conscience. We will continue to speak out at every opportunity, but words don't feed hungry children.
The widespread starvation of the Palestinians hasn't stopped the steady and unrelenting bombardment of the Gaza Strip by Israel. In Deir el-Balah, Israel carried out repeated airstrikes and has pushed in its armored units to again surround and enter into the devastated city. Mass funerals of those who get killed in the Israeli attacks have become an unending feature in the Gaza Strip. And those who managed to survive the Israeli bombardment were again seen fleeing in haste along the roads leading out of Deir el-Balah, using carts, donkey carriages, or even traveling on foot. The little glimmer of hope that there could be a ceasefire on the horizon has again been extinguished. Both Israel and the United States have pulled their negotiators out of the talks from Doha.
Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad. And it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
Israel is fighting this war using American weapons. In the last 22 months of the Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip, almost every building has been razed to the ground. The death toll of the Palestinians has crossed the 59,600 mark, and yet Israel insists Hamas still remains a fighting force in the Gaza Strip. But the question neither Israel nor the United States have so far shed light on is what really is the military capacity of Hamas after 22 months of bombardment. And is the wholesale starvation of the Palestinians necessary for Israel to defeat Hamas? On the 19th of July, 9 people were shot dead while they were playing pool in a tourist city in the southwestern part of Ecuador. According to the police, the people who were killed were actually collateral victims and not really the intended targets of a premeditated attack by gunmen who were chasing 2 men on a motorcycle in a working-class neighborhood of General Villamil Playas. Reportedly, when one of the men being chased tried to hide in the pool hall, the gunmen, who were armed with automatic rifles, burst in and opened indiscriminate fire, killing at least 9 people inside. Now, Saturday's shooting is yet another instance of the locals getting caught up in the spiraling gang violence that has sent Ecuador's murder rate soaring to one of the highest in the region. Once perceived as a beacon of stability in South America, Ecuador, in a short span of just 5 years, has been transformed into one of the world's most violent nations and a major drug trafficking hub. Our next report gets you more.
A bunch of 9 childhood friends assembled in Playas, a coastal city in the southern Guayas province, which is a popular destination for local tourists because of its pleasant climate and beaches. The plan was to play pool and have a merry time, but unfortunately for them, they were soon to get trapped in the vicious cycle of drug violence that has rocked the Latin American nation. According to investigators, gunmen arrived in a car chasing 2 other men and fired at least 80 bullets indiscriminately, which resulted in the death of the group of friends besides injuring 2 other people. Reportedly, a local football coach and the son of a radio presenter were among the 9 dead. But authorities were able to identify only one body at the scene.
Unfortunately, the National Police responded to a call for help involving gunshots at a billiard hall, which led us, as police officers, to investigate. Unfortunately, when the police arrived, many people affected by this event were removed from the scene by residents and relatives from the area, so the investigative units are conducting this analysis to reach a conclusion.
In the aftermath of the incident, the city of Playas declared a state of emergency, and extra police and soldiers have been deployed. The unfortunate shooting comes as Ecuador experiences its most violent start to a year in recent history. In the first 5 months of 2025, Ecuador recorded 4,051 homicides. Once perceived as a haven of peace, in the last 5 years, things have taken a turn for the worse in Ecuador. Its strategic position, sandwiched between neighboring Colombia and Peru, the world's 2 largest producers of cocaine, combined with its large ports, lax security and endemic corruption, have lured foreign drug cartels to its shore. Severity of the situation can be gauged by the fact that despite not producing the drug, 70% of the world's cocaine now flows through Ecuadorian ports. Consequently, the once safe Andean nation has turned into a battleground for who's who of mafias from Albania to Italy to Mexico. The homicide rate has risen from 6 per 100,000 residents in 2018 to 38 per 100,000 in 2024.
Esta no es una lucha contra la delincuencia común.
Announcing that the government is in a state of war, the president, Daniel Noboa, had declared a state of emergency in January 2024. The fight against the lucrative drug trade has proven so far to be a mammoth task, but it's not all doom and gloom for the government in the fight against drug cartels. A couple of days after the unfortunate incident in Playas, the Ecuadorian government celebrated the extradition of country's biggest drug lord, Adolfo Macias Villamar, also known as Fito, to the United States a day earlier, calling it a significant victory in the fight against organized crime. Fito was recaptured in June after his escape from a maximum security prison in 2024.
Ayer a las 2 p.m. un avión del Departamento de Justicia.
Yesterday at 2 p.m., a U.S. Department of Justice plane took the prisoner to New York, where he will be prosecuted for several crimes. The transfer and handover operation began at noon with the intervention of the security unit led by Minister Reinberg. As you already know, the transfer and handover operation took place in Guayaquil at midday with the intervention of the security unit that moved him from La Roca to the air base. The extradition of alias Fito comes less than a month after his recapture and is a major blow to organized crime. The extradition of Macias Villamar, as well as the operations to dismantle criminal economies, are actions that weaken the mafias, and the national government is determined to continue this fight.
Will President Daniel Noboa, who had pledged to curb violence of narco gangs in his election campaign, emerge victorious? A panic-stricken, anxious nation where the murder rate has quadrupled in the last 5 years awaits.
The West African nation of Togo has been rocked by anti-government demonstrations that are primarily driven by musicians, bloggers and activists, mobilized by a controversial change in the constitution that now allows Togo's longtime head of the state, Faure Gnassingbé, to shift to a new role as the president of the Council of Ministers. There is palpable anger on the streets of the capital Lome and wariness with the regime that has now been in power for nearly 6 decades. In recent weeks, at least about 5 people were killed while confronting the official security forces during the government crackdown, whereas 2 bodies were found in the lagoons north of central Lome, though the circumstances leading to their deaths remains unclear. In addition to this, there are reports of widespread random detentions, often of uninvolved passers-by, while informal pro-government militia, armed and dangerous, roams the streets in pickup trucks. Our next report gets you more details.
Although small in size, the West African nation of Togo assumes significance as a developing maritime and transit hub in the region, courtesy an important port in the seaside capital of Lomé, which is perched on the edge of the Atlantic. Serving as a gateway into inland Sahel nations, the country is also home to a major West African airline, which means unrest there could reverberate across the region. In recent years, large demonstrations have been held in Lomé, with Togolese asking for Faure Gnassingbé, who has led Togo since 2005, to step down. Between 2017 and 2018, the nation of 4 million people was rocked by demonstrations, with slogans such as Faure must go and Togo stands up reverberating in the streets. Violent crackdowns followed, and the government in 2022 banned public demonstrations, citing security reasons. On 3rd of May this year, Faure was sworn in to a new post of President of the Council of Ministers, which has no official term limits, making him eligible for re-election by the parliament indefinitely. Critics and opposition figures labeled the changes to the constitution as an institutional coup d'etat, giving rise to anger and violence on the streets of the West African country. The high costs of living in the rest of the country didn't help matters.
All we want is for Faure Gnassingbé to step down. We'll keep protesting even after the 3 days until he finally leaves power.
He should step aside and let someone else lead. You can't keep ruling us by force forever. Let someone else prove what they can do.
Faure, please, set to go free. This country doesn't belong to you or to the Gnassingbé family. Just let go of the country. We, the citizens, will lead the country.
In disproportionate use of force against peaceful protesters, tear gas and batons were used by the security forces to disperse crowds blocking roads. 86-year-old politician Jean-Lucien Savy de Tove is now president, who is the oldest in Togo's history. But Faure remains the de facto leader, following in the footsteps of his father, the late Gnassingbé Eyadema, who ruled over Togo with an iron fist for 38 years, making him the longest-serving African ruler at the time of his death. The brazen change in the government structure has been widely criticized in a region threatened by rampant coups and other threats to the democratic structure. But the Togolese government, doubling down, has threatened legal action against the protests' organizers and have labeled the protests a campaign of disinformation and hatred orchestrated from abroad. Though officially a democracy, in practice Togo operates as a militarized state, with the army heavily involved in politics. These days, capital Lomé is crawling with stern-faced armed gendarmes, who are often accused of arresting and torturing dissidents. But the decades-long dynastic government in power since 1967 is increasingly under pressure to relinquish power. The question is, how long can Faure Gnassingbé withstand this unrelenting pressure and maintain his stranglehold on power?
And with that's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.